Hello, this is Emily McCall presenting Chapter 9, The Conservative Counter-Revolution in the Era of Reagan and George H.W. Bush. This video will cover the political climate prior to Reagan, Reagan's background, his campaign, his time in office, as well as his decline. Due to events like the Great Depression, the resulting presidencies were held by liberal candidates. Along with this, conservatives were kept from office due to liberals convincing northern white Catholics and the southern white lower middle class voters that welfare programs and high taxes were caused by the conservatives. The political climate would soon change, however, to one of a more conservative stance. This came about due to many conservatives being annoyed with high taxes and jobs that benefited women and African Americans. There was also a large surge of people moving to the Sun Belt in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s who held many conservative beliefs. Many conservatives knew they had to take action to gain power, and the election of Reagan in '80 would cement conservative control. Reagan's background formed the beliefs of his presidency. His father was an alcoholic, and he was relatively poor. Reagan actually supported Franklin Roosevelt in the '30s, but once Reagan began to land roles in movies and thus gain more revenue, he resented Roosevelt's policies due to higher taxes. Reagan idolized hardworking men and eventually stated that Roosevelt destroyed the forefathers' goals of America. Reagan was viewed as an extreme conservative until he was elected governor of California, where he showed very little regard for the poor. He originally ran for the Republican nomination against Gerald Ford, but lost until 1980, when he did gain the nomination against Carter. While Carter supported many ideals similar to Reagan, like cutting social spending, Reagan coupled this with his support of supply-side economics, which is essentially lowering taxes and decreasing regulation. Reagan was also able to change his message to fit the mood of the people. The biggest factor that led to his victory was his support by the male voting population, as well as the southern and western regions, and his high level of optimism. For the first 8 months in office, Reagan passed legislation that cut the budget and taxes, as well as the elimination of many regulations and decreased the federal government policy rules. One of the biggest ideals of Reagan was known as trickle-down economics, which meant decreasing the taxation of the rich to stimulate the economy. Even though the Democratic Party had a majority in both the House and Senate, they lacked leadership and was intimidated by Reagan's sweeping victory. They were also fearful of going against Reagan and thus being labeled by his advisors as going against the people, since most Americans supported Reagan's mindset.